Test, test. All right. Okay, we are good. Move on. To the next item. So the next item on the agenda is a notice from a neighboring community, City of Essex Junction. They are having a public hearing on amendments to their land development code, which is what they call their zoning bylaw. They are essentially adopting a form-based code. I have not done a deep dive into the standards. I've read through some of the proposals. The reason neighboring communities are notified is if there's an issue with the zoning proposal that might have either an opportunity or an impact for a neighboring community like Williston, the planning commission has an opportunity to comment. That's the statutory requirement. Secondarily, it is always interesting to take a look at what neighboring communities are doing and how they're doing it. So if you read through these standards and have any questions or comments, we can talk about them. Our next meeting will be right before their public hearing. So if there was to be formal comment, we would need to talk about that and turn it around pretty quickly. But the staff recommendation here is their proposal follows their town plan and the regional ecos plan. And then I think staff will take a deeper dive into what some of these standards are and maybe how they compare to our form-based code.
For informational purposes, I'm intrigued by their, what do they call it, the transportation?
Transit
TOD,
transit oriented development.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it. I'm just wondering, maybe at the next meeting, we could talk a little bit about what that is and whether it has implications for what we do.
Yeah, that's what we did. I'm not sure if we use that exact language in our either RFP process for getting a consultant or wording it. Part of the reason why form-based code is so popular is it's creates pedestrian friendly, high density development. So it's a place where you want to walk, where you want to bike, where transit, whether that's a fixed bus route or something like micro transit, has the density necessary to support those multimodal options. So our form-based code was able to access certain funding opportunities because it met those thresholds for being a transit-oriented development. If you think about our regulating plan, there's street specifications that have dedicated bike lanes, whether they're on or off street, to provide those multimodal options.
Yeah. I had one observation. The one observation is that they are implementing this plan on a very small footprint of property after a huge amount of development has happened in that area, which is kind of surprising to me, the timing. The questions or musings are, if they have a zone that allows 9-story buildings and one that allows 7-story buildings, are we gonna get are we gonna developers not want to do things that tap corners because we restrict them to 4 stories that would otherwise do it because we are sort of out competed in desirability? And the other sort of musing, that's sort of almost a rhetorical question because I don't think we're going to change our zoning based on that. And the other musing is that if they get the kind of density you can get with 7 and 9-story buildings, are they going to be trying to get more use of the shared sewage treatment plant as we are also trying to get more use of the shared treatment plant?
Those are good questions. Certainly greater density feeding into the plant that's shared by the village, the town of Essex and the town of Williston. There is increased demand there. Some of you might recall from the sewer allocation memo that we review every March that, we've cumulatively across Williston, but it's true in the other 2 municipalities as well, added a lot of units without seeing an increase in flow. Because we're apparently not adding units fast enough to outpace the savings that are happening from demographic changes, shrinking household size, water conserving fixtures, chasing down leaks, etc. But when you talk with users of the system, or the folks who manage the system, there's sort of a sense that at some point, we're gonna have to see more flow. Because we are adding a lot more, so, you know, to Chapin's point, yes, and I would just say that the overall capacity of that plant, is a regional concern. It's a concern for those three municipalities, but it's also a concern for the county and beyond, because this is where a lot of, the county's housing goals, the state's housing goals would need to be achieved. The other thing I'd say about the building height is I don't think Williston's in danger of being outcompeted by somebody offering a taller height just yet. And the reason in part is, you know, we're transit oriented, but there's a chicken or egg with the frequency and usability of the transit and people's willingness to live somewhere that they can't park one or two cars. And the cost of building structured parking. So it's pretty easy to do 3, maybe 4 stories and park every unit with one space underneath the building and one above ground with a handful of, you know, visitor and flex spaces. It's really hard if you start building a building that now needs multiple parking decks, either underneath it or in those ground stories. And so the market demand needs to be a little different, or there needs to be less parking. And the only way to have less parking right now is to truly be in, you know, like Winooski or Burlington, where, you know, you have a more urban population, and also, you know, I guess I'm seeing in city center, South Burlington, my backyard, a student population who just are able to, you know, be there without a car, or if you work at the medical center, there's a frequent bus, you can do it. The last part I'll say about building height is the nice thing is, and some of you will remember this, I referred to adopting the form-based code as like, it's buying the Lego set, framework is there, and adjusting the number of stories that are allowed can kind of be done literally by just changing that one number. You don't need to do a lot to the rest of the design standards or the parking standards or the streetscapes to just go with a taller building. So we do see communities going with those taller buildings. South Burlington is allowing, I don't know, in the double digits over near the University Mall at this point. And yet, you know, that building hasn't shown up yet. But it is something to keep thinking about. So.
The one aesthetic thing was interesting to me is they have a ratio between the amount of space in front of the building and the height of the building. We didn't do anything like that. That was intriguing, yeah.
We have some other design
Yeah.
considerations, but
Particular
not
numbers.
specifically a ratio of.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing we see is, as we've sort of diagrammed out how the blocks that we mapped would develop is, you know, you can use that interior of the block behind the buildings for parking, but only so much. And so you really start thinking about, well, is somebody gonna do multiple decks of structured parking at, you know, approximately $60,000 a space construction cost? Somebody's gotta really be able to see their way through recapturing that cost in the rent, in a way that they don't right now, so. But you can always allow it and see what happens.
Yeah.
Any other comment or questions on the Essex Junction information? Okay, let's see, we're doing okay on time, are we? I know we alerted folks to 7:30 start.
Yep.
So, and it's 7:20 now.
Yes, we have a couple minutes to fill. I guess the reason for that is the town plan amendment originally, we were gonna have that town plan public hearing like 7:10 to 7:30,
Yeah.
and that had to get postponed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you wanna dive into the chimney supply conversation. And then pick it back up. I'm happy to present the staff memo and just get you started on that.
Because I don't want to shortchange anybody who's
Yeah.
signing on one and so.
Yeah, and I may also have to head over to the select board closer to 8, so if I can get that
Yeah.
started.
Why don't you do that?
All right. So I wrote this memo. I did notice as I was getting ready to come over here that the link in the agenda wasn't working, so I fixed it before I
Okay.
came over. You can see the big, long, ugly link pasted in the thing. But I did also print that memo out. So if anybody would like a hard copy, I'm happy to send a few of those down. And anybody in the audience similarly. So. Yeah. That's, yeah, you go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So some of the planning commission members will recall the chimney supply site. And request, under the specific plan process all the way back in 2021. Almost 5 years ago, when the final hearing was held on that. And so just to give everybody the real big overview, a specific plan is a property owner or applicant driven request to change zoning. It's a way to not sort of wait around for the town plan to change or for the planning commission to decide to take something up, but rather to make an application to the planning commission to ask for zoning to be changed on a specific site and for a specific purpose and the development of a specific site plan, which is why it's called specific plan. That specific plan application was ultimately not approved by the planning commission. And it had to do with a requirement of the zoning bylaw that a specific plan provide a public benefit. And what happened in really brief summary is the public benefit that the applicant's chimney supply had proposed and were willing to engage with the town on involved a level of participation and partnership with the town and a level of reprioritization of departmental goals in public works that really felt beyond the town's ability to respond positively to. So the planning commission looked at this. The public benefit was essentially a sidewalk and crosswalk extension, but one that chimney supply would have paid into, the town would have had to pursue some grants for, Bruce and Christine in Public Works would have had to rework their work plan and priorities to make it happen. The planning commission saw all of that, saw communication from Public Works and said, we feel like we could approve this, but we're approving something that's a dead end if we are, and rather we would say no to this specific plan and not move forward with the proposed bylaw change. So that's where you were. Since then, a couple things have happened or are about to happen. You've adopted a town plan that calls for this area of town to be looked at. Both boundaries and allowed uses in this area. You know, and that was written by us and by you in part with recall of this project and this proposal and how it went. And so the call out in the town plan provides the planning commission with the ability to just move forward with this on their own if they want to. And so we've been approached by the owners of property and business saying, we'd like to look at this zoning around Commerce Street again. So here we are. So the memo I gave you is very, very brief summary of that specific plan and where we've gone with the comprehensive plan. The other thing I'll note is that where our public benefit we were talking about was sidewalk extension and pedestrian improvements in the area. Well, we're just about to get started on an active transportation plan for Williston. Melinda's been working on that. We have a consultant on board. We're funded for it. And that plan will bring new life into the town's prioritization of things like where do we fix sidewalks and crosswalks and where do we and how do we connect bike paths, et cetera. So we'll have an independent effort that could very likely result in reprioritizing something a lot like the public benefit that was under discussion in the specific plan process. So things are moving now that weren't moving 5 years ago when we first took this up. For the part of the owners of the land and the owners of the business, their situation really hasn't changed. They would like to see some land that's adjacent to them that's zoned residential and some land adjacent to them that's zoned Gateway West changed to the industrial zone district west, which is the zoning district that they're in. Doing so would allow them to expand the building and the vehicle circulation in a way that would help keep the business viable in that spot in town, and would work for them. So the request is for the planning commission to take up that bylaw amendment again and, consider it. If you're in favor of us working on it, direct staff to write that draft up and take it through the adoption process for your consideration. A few things I'll bring up in that, at its most basic, Emily, if you just go to the map again real quick. At its most basic, it's about moving some boundaries, so it's about putting everything inside that red box, including what's in the blue and orange boxes, into the industrial west district. It could also be about directing some enhanced buffering standards when you have industrial up against residential. That was being addressed by the owners as part of the specific plan application. You might recall they did a noise study. They were having a really tall screening fence and fixing some overly tall lighting on the site. We could help you write those buffering standards into the bylaws and say, here in the industrial zoning district, when you've got houses in your backyard, here's some things you're going to need to do. So that just sort of sets the stage. The question for the planning commission is, are you interested in having the staff work on this and bring it back to you as a draft amendment? I conclude the memo just kind of talking about the timeline and trying to be somewhat reasonable with expectations, but also saying, this is about as fast as bylaw amendments ever happen in town, just given the hearing requirements, the informational requirements. But tonight, I'm interested in hearing from the commission. I'm interested in having the commission hear from the owners and applicants about how their world is currently. And then if there's direction from the commission to move forward on this, we would bring back some amendment language to you at a later date. And if there's specific things you want us to address in that, this is a great night to let us know that.
Can you go over for us the current zoning to the west of that?
Sure.
Is it Gateway West at that point?
Yeah,
Until you get to Brownell Road and then it turns into
It's
commercial?
industrial all around,
it's
Industrial, I should say.
or excuse me, gateway all around that intersection.
correct. So Gateway West is an area along Williston Road and around Brownell Road, around the intersection, about one lot deep. It was all originally zoned residential, so there was this kind of continuous finger of residential. You see it there in the yellow, extending all down Brownell Road, and then that brown is the Gateway West. So this was something the Planning Commission and Select Board adopted in 2015, recognizing that RZD residential, which at the time meant almost entirely single unit dwelling residential, really wasn't working out for that area anymore. There's a lot of traffic and a lot of noise there. There's relatively large lots looking for some redevelopment. Since that was adopted in 2015, one lot next door to O'Brien's store was redeveloped. The house on it was demolished, and a new mixed-use building was constructed that's got a dentist office in the bottom and a residential unit up above. And then there's a sort of utility garage in the back with an accessory dwelling unit above as well.
And there's a gas station, quick stop there.
Yeah, you've got a gas station, you've got an undeveloped lot. And because this was being changed from residential at the time, there's hesitancy to put anything really intense into it. So the allowed commercial uses are kind of office uses. They're not retail or really customer oriented. The gas station is still a non-conforming use in that zone. And so actually, Emily, if you just move a little bit, where the purple touches the brown is part of the boundary change we're talking about. So sitting there under the purple is the chimney supply building. And the parcel next to it is partially in the residential district, that's the yellow, and partially in Gateway. And then the parcel next to that it's in residential with a Gateway parcel, or sorry, it's in Gateway with a residential parcel behind it. So that's what we're.
Yeah, this parcel is not involved in the proposal, I believe.
Yep.
The flag lot one.
So that back lot one and the people on Kirby Lane are the people who are residential who will be most affected by it.
Yes,
And for context, this lot on the other side of Commerce Street is Island Ice Cream.
Okay, well, we are at 7:30, so, what is the news? Pleasure, do we want to immediately give Matt feedback on that, or do we want to wait so that later in the meeting?
I'd suggest since you've got your community meeting for.
Yeah.
For the area north of here, that we pause this and launch it. We've got folks from
Yep.
Chimney Supply here who probably wanna talk to you.
Okay,
But since you've got a lot of momentum with the site visit, I would recommend, getting those folks on the schedule. And you know, if I have to run out to the select board, you don't need me here to pick it back up with Chimney
I'll
Supply.
just say I'm not decided where.
all right, so, Emily, do you want, are you gonna, lead us through the opening of the community meeting?
Yeah, so from 6 to 6:30, some of us, all the commission members here, and then a lot of folks in the room, we did a quick site visit to scope out the area. So this is a proposal, to consider changing the zoning district boundary in the vicinity of Industrial Ave and North Brownell Road. This topic came up a couple years ago, when Josh Gerard of Roadside Motorsports approached the planning commission. He owns a business in the residential district, but it's really an industrial use. And the planning commission at the time said, let's pause that discussion. We're working on our town plan. The new town plan is gonna call for action items around allowed and prohibited uses, zoning district boundaries, etc. So the topic was picked up earlier this summer. This public process was launched in July. We did a lot of outreach, so mailings went out to property owners in the vicinity. The 4 property owners got special letters with the survey, and then all the abutting properties got a standard form letter. We got 11 survey responses back by 12 respondents. And we'll go into those momentarily. I've also included,
Could you make that wider
yeah.
for those of us over 16?
Or anybody that's not like 2 feet away from the screen like me for sure. So I did include maps and talked about the 150-foot Allen Brook at the site visit. That buffer does have impact on the 4 subject properties. It varies, and we can look through that in a moment. And the impetus for this amendment is town plan language in chapter 15 about evaluating boundary changes and evaluating land use in both chapters 15 and 16. The reason the town plan uses the word evaluate is because it doesn't want it just to be a consider, where, oh, we just considered it. Evaluate is take in information, take public comment, have a public process, look at all the facts and information, and then make a conscious decision whether to move forward with a proposal or not. After reviewing the survey responses, I was inspired by a different section of chapter 16, evaluate the corner commercial standard. So I do want to note that even with the change to this district boundary, any change or addition to 736 Industrial Ave, which is the roadside motorsports, is going to be heavily restricted by the Allen Brook and nonconformity standards in chapter 4. And in developing a corner commercial standard, alongside evaluating the strict no change to nature and extent in the chapter 4, might be a middle ground option to just purely moving the zoning district boundary. So originally this concept kind of became of, 2 options: no change or change the district boundary. And option 2, if the boundary is changed, would it be all 4 of the parcels? Would it be some of the parcels? Would it bisect? When we were out on the site visit, we talked about how the property with the trucking and playground business extends really far back. And then I'm tossing out option 3, other regulatory change. So talking about the nonconformity standards, allowing something that's an existing nonconformity to have some wiggle room to add on or modify, or looking at corner commercial. I do note that other businesses in the residential zoning district that are non-conforming are River Cove Animal Hospital, and Adams Farm Market.
Corner quick stop too, I think.
That's not in the.
That's in the village, yep, and I don't know if we made gas stations.
I don't remember if we specifically
I-
said retail fuel.
I think we kept it because it's such a big driver for the village that, if. If something were to ever happen to that intersection in the village, or Bernie was to modify the corner quick stop to move the pumps, being able to maintain that non-conforming use. So the flip. So some area maps, this is roadside motorsports, we were standing by the pedestrian bridge in this gravel area across the street. And that's the map with that 150-foot Allenbrook buffer. So if this was a vacant site with nothing on it and someone were to propose something new today, they would be limited to that bottom right corner out of the buffer. Jumping over to 11 to 19 North Brownell Road, this is the occupied dwelling in the front with the commercial garage structures in the back. It's also partially constrained, so you know, if you were to scrape the site and build new, nothing could be within that buffer. The abutting property, 39 North Brownell Road, that's a single family home. I'd say that one's the least impacted of all of the lots with that buffer. And then the largest parcel, 5995 North Brownell Road, that extends all the way back to the Allen Brook. It does have a crossing with the power utilities. That's also quite impacted, where any development potential is probably limited to that existing gravel area and some of the trees. Theoretically, this area is out of the Allenbrook buffer, but infeasible to fit anything more than probably like a backyard shed. Survey results. We heard a lot of comments about the street and traffic, so this area is in flux with traffic with the Route 2 Industrial Ave Mountain View Road intersection project wrapping up. There were a couple comments about the trees blocking the view, so that corner of Rosignol Park is town land. And I did communicate that to the Public Works Department, that some of those sumac trees have kind of grown up. If you're taking a left off North Brownell, it could be kind of tricky. But the Planning Commission, a lot of the comments were about intersection and traffic, and those are a little bit beyond your scope. Things like adding turning lanes to North Brownell would either be a decision of the Public Works Department and their, you know, transportation planning program. Or very rarely, if a development was so big in the area that a traffic study warranted that upgrade be made, but that's extremely rare, and that would have to be a major development to sort of trip that threshold. Yeah, I'll pause there if there's any questions or comments on, you know, some of the area maps and the survey responses.
Emily, do you have a visual showing what the change would look like?
No, mainly because there's so many different options to consider,
Okay.
wanting to sort of start from scratch, but I can pull up the area map and annotate over it. So these are the 4 subject properties, and currently all of them are in yellow. They're all in the residential zoning district. So one option might be to keep everything or put everything in industrial. That probably doesn't make any sense. I remember in one of those earlier conversations a year or two ago, was if it were to be all 4 properties, having it be bisected along here. So these 4 fronting parcels would be on industrial west, and then that back half would stay in residential. I think that was another option that was talked about. And then there's also the question of, do you just change 1 property, 2 property, 3, or all 4?
Emily, the, concept of the corner commercial, sort of zoning idea. Would that, maybe the question is, should that apply to all four of those properties, or is it only the motorsports? Does it only apply to the motorsports business?
That's a good question. I think very preliminary conversations have been more towards a true commercial property. The Jaro property is interesting because it is owner occupied, so our bylaw does have separate provisions for home businesses that are a little bit more flexible in terms of use. Pretty much anything can be a home business, but our very current home business standards are very restrictive in square footage, traffic. There's no outdoor storage allowed in the residential zoning district, which makes it hard, which is basically saying no by saying yes for a lot of light industrial or light residential home level industrial where you might store some parts outside, that kind of thing. But I think it would be something that the commission could think about. If is it just a purely commercial property? Is it mixed use where the property shares space with residential, whether it's a home business or a true mixed use?
You use the term corner commercial. Can someone explain that to what it is?
Yeah, that is an undefined term currently in our bylaw. We talk a little bit about it in the town plan. Think about, the corner store where you can walk down and get an ice cream cone or batteries, like the gas station is a corner commercial spot. Adams Farm Market where it's a little grocery store. Generally in residentially zoned areas, you like to have some non-residential use in a busier area that people can get to. So like your little gas station, your little creamy window kind of thing, where it's a commercial use in a residential area that's compatible with the character of the area.
Or would you say that it's typically designed to support the residential area around it? Or is that not necessarily connected?
I think that's a question for the commission to consider is it purely something that you walk over and grab, a pack of batteries and some Band-Aids, or is it something like roadside motorsports where you're making your once every couple of years big toy purchase? Yeah.
Years.
I think some of it's,
You know, if it's more often than.
I think some of it's an element of scale and just what we observe has developed in Williston, either prior to zoning existing or under old zoning where, the other thing in Williston is we have some relatively well-traveled roads that are zoned, that go through areas that are zoned entirely residential. So, Old Stage Road and Mountain View Road are fairly busy, rural highways. It's a place that it makes sense for somebody like Adams Farm to be there. It's not a place that makes sense for McDonald's to be there. Or probably any kind of chain because they want greater traffic, but throughout Williston, there are these places where, there's either something like that or often a converted house like River Cove Animal Hospital where, well, it's on the corner of River Cove Road and Route 2A. It's a busy spot. It just happens to be on the edge of the residential zoning district. You've got to put the boundary somewhere. That's where it ended up. And the boundary generally makes sense where it is, but so does the land use being commercial, even though it's zoned residential. And so places like this, places like we were just talking about, that Gateway West area, they're kind of tough nuts to crack if all you do is move boundaries around. So sometimes you might want to say, well, the boundary here is residential, but really this corner doesn't make sense for residential. We don't want to write it its own zoning district. So the idea we've talked about is helping the planning commission develop this sort of corner commercial development standard that would allow something more than residential to go in those spaces that are suited for it without completely, perforating a residential neighborhood with businesses. So it's still gonna be a little challenging to come up with the right development standard for that. We always talk about running it by the Dollar General test. will this or will this not allow somebody to build a Dollar General? And I'll leave it to you to decide whether that's a good or a bad thing, but, those are the kind of tests, the McDonald's test. Does this mean someone's gonna build a McDonald's here?
Well, if I remember those, if I'm not conflating my documents that you sent out, there was some language in there about ensuring, whatever the case, ensuring that the businesses in that area be very much in accord with the kind of the spirit or the character of the neighborhood, correct?
Yeah, that's my one concern. Current use, I think is personally for me, okay. That's what it was when I purchased the property, totally fine. It's more, what would happen if it turned commercial? What would they be able to do with those properties that then may affect the entire residential area in terms of the traffic it might bring? Trucks in the middle of the night, noise, light pollution. Can they then sell that property, even though they may never intend to use it as anything different than it's being used now? But would they sell that property to someone who would bring the McDonald's in? Or, it doesn't have to be that, but something that then would bring in noise or more traffic than we already have, and just, like you said, change the flavor of the area. How do we adjust for that to allow them to do what they're doing now and make some of those adjustments that make sense without completely disrupting the residential areas?
Can I make a statement real quick? So it's not, just to go back on what you said as far as commercial, we're not trying to get commercial zoning. It's industrial zoning, which is what industrial ag already is. Two totally different zoning requirements. So like Walmart, Home Depot, that's like commercial. We're industrial. There's a lot more restrictions on industrial than commercial.
So you're on industrial ag though, there are the properties that abut the long trucking one, and I think that's very, very different than the three other properties, especially since there's a natural cutoff in terms of the park. I feel it really devalues the park as well. In terms of like the trucking company and the other three properties, I think are completely different cases. Really.
Whether it's commercial, industrial, or whatever, the changing the zoning itself doesn't give anybody ultimate ability to put any business there. They still have to do a permitting process and be a permitted business, correct? So it doesn't really take
Although most of the time, we really like to have the zoning map in some formal parks, registers, that makes our job easier, making the map. If our time, maybe have a uniquely shaped parcel, you can choose to run the boundary through the parcel. So, you know, front half is one thing, back half is something else, if you're.
Similar to what you say, not cutting that long property at that new, versus the upland and whatever.
Correct.
But even with that breakout, you still have residential abutting properties there.
Yeah.
You know, they can't speak to that one lot. Yeah, back for a second. Why are we here? How did this happen? And, you know, how do we allow commercial, industrial businesses to even start in these properties when they're residentially zoned?
So some of what's here on this map, some of the uses on this map predate zoning in Williston. So, you know, zoning in Williston starts around 1962, 1964. And at that point, you know, there was already quite a lot of development, in town. And so you know, the town inherits kind of a mix of stuff and then starts trying to figure out where to draw boundaries. And you know, so we have those examples kind of all over town where we have what we call a pre-existing non-conforming or a legal non-conforming use that, you know, today, if the trucking company went away for a period of 12 months, it could not come back. So that's the rule on non-conforming uses in Williston is you can have it, you know, it predates the establishment of the zoning that now prohibits it. But if you were there before the zoning, you get to keep on keeping on. But if you go away for long enough,
Or if you sell to somebody else,
well,
that person can't.
you can sell to somebody else and they can maintain the use. Again, as long as the use is not discontinued for a period of greater than 12 months. Doesn't matter who owns it. It matters what's happening on the parcel. So the idea of non-conforming uses is that your intent, your policy intent is for them to go away. So when you draw residential zoning over the top of Adams Farm Market or River Cove Vet, your policy statement is, we hope eventually that this will go away. And so the reason the town plan says, hey, planning commission, maybe work on this, is because we have some things like those two things where it doesn't really seem like that's the policy intent of the town, is to make them go away. Similar with some of what we're looking at with roadside. That, you know, some of this is just an accident of you got to draw the line somewhere and try to make reasonable shapes as you cut the town up in these different zoning districts, and it's never perfect. So we got here in part because the current town plan recognizes that we have that situation. Our zoning doesn't address it well. As staff, Emily and I have experienced that with people coming to us saying, can I expand my building? Say, oh, well, not if it makes your use any bigger because you're actually a non-conforming use. So we had that conversation with River Cove Vet at the DRB. They wanted to substantially expand the size of the building. And we said, you got to prove that you're somehow making the building bigger and the parking lot bigger, but not making the use any bigger. And, you know, we couldn't do it. So this exercise for the planning commission is about figuring out, you know, we have a business owner who's in who's got land in that residential zone, who says, hey, I'm really constrained by this. Can these both boundaries move? And when you pull on the thread, the whole sweater kind of starts to come apart. So part of the purpose of these meetings is to figure out, well, if we change anything, what is the boundary of that change in consideration of all the things you folks are talking about, like abutting uses, incompatibility, noise impacts. Can we come up with a better policy solution than is currently in the zoning for this area out of this? And that's the assignment to the planning commission. You know, it's sort of like, you know, first do no harm, right? You have what you have, but what you have isn't great for everybody. Is there a better way to draw that line, or a better way to write the development standards to manage these uses that are kind of rubbing up against one another?
And because current uses can continue, our job is to be looking at what should happen 20 years from now. What is the long-term vision for that area? We're not trying to look at what should happen today. that's set, it's zoned a certain way, and there's existing uses, neither of those. Even if they're incompatible, neither is changing. We're looking like, if it were to change, eventually, what direction should it go?
Well, in consideration of that though, like maintaining in residential on that parcel with the trucks, I think is the best thing. It abuts a park, which is like if you were to put in more housing or, you know, apartments there, that'd be hugely beneficial to apartments. And like, it's not too far from the bus line, so if people do have to go to, you know, if you have students going to UVM or something like that, so that would be. I really think it's like that park and that trucking company really are a mismatch in that area.
And to me, these are the comments we wanna hear these things.
It seems like a simple compromise. I mean, it's that one lot. It's a real stickler for most of us here. I mean, I shouldn't speak for that one house on the, how it got isolated around all these businesses. I don't know, and I can't speak for that person, but majority of concern is that one lot, and that's would create a buffer from whatever might happen beyond that. What, you know, and then the auto place, the motorcycle place decides to do it, that's really not gonna affect anybody in that neighborhood. The commercial, or sorry, the motorsports is probably getting a lot of value from that location as well. So it's like the trucking company is probably not getting a lot of value from that location. Because of that, there's that bad corner that they have there on industrial. And, you know, Brownout Road, I mean, it's not supposed to have trucks on it anyway. And like gets torn up every year from the trucks driving up on it, so like, there's no real. And like, that's like a company that you can stick out or somewhere with better highway access. And I don't see any value that is getting from that area either. So it's.
I would point out that motorsports affects the people who are across the road behind it and the people who are
Yeah,
further
yeah.
industrial.
But the actual company is probably getting value from that
Oh, yeah,
specific lot.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying, but that trucking company, I don't see how it's getting value from that specific lot. Versus having a lot that has better highway access or better road access than Brownout Road. Especially with that bad corner, that bad turning corner, you know, with the blind spot, so.
The little house that's up against the trucking company. That was all one parcel at one time. Because that house came up for sale a few years ago and I spoke to the woman who owned it. And she said that they owned all of that at one point. And then separated it out. So that was all one lot at some point, or that house was renovated. It was in dire need of attention.
So what's I know we've been talking about like use, Matt, you use that term quite a lot in your explanation. How would you characterize the use of the lot with the trucking company?
I would put it in a very general sense in the industrial category.
Okay.
And
Transportation,
Yes.
warehousing.
yeah, it's, you know, involves transportation, involves outdoor storage, outdoor work areas. It's kind of a little bit of a hodgepodge, but. You know. That's most of it, and you know, to some degree, like Emily just had that different boundary, you know, that sort of she had drawn that excluded that from any change. And so if the intent was, you know, that's been there a long time. We've been saying for a long time by zoning it residential that eventually it should go away and potentially be redeveloped into a residential property. If you make the decision to leave that out of a change to industrial, that's just what you're saying. You're saying, yeah, you know, it's there, it gets the benefit of being a legal non-conforming use. But eventually, what this bylaw says is it should change into something conforming, it should go away.
So, just to follow up, so when you said that if it's sold, the use could be maintained.
Correct.
What exactly would that use be? Only a similar trucking kind of company or
Yeah,
sort of a
so
broader scope or a narrower
we,
scope?
we have some really specific but difficult to define words in the bylaw that say you can continue that use as long as you don't change the nature or extent of the use. And so we have not looked at that as an outright prohibition on making changes to the property, you know, moving paved areas around or even building additions like we had proposed with River Cove Vet. But extent in the name of use speaks somehow to intensity. So if it's an operation today that's generating, you know, what appears to be a relatively small amount of truck traffic. And someone said, well, I'm also transportation and warehousing, but I'm going to have, you know, fundamentally more vehicles in and out of there, all day long. The answer would be, well, no, you're changing the extent of the use, you're changing the intensity. So it's both what you're doing and how much of it you're doing that you're stuck with when you've got a non-conforming use. And we would just look for some measurable metric that's a good proxy for intensity of use, like hours of operation, traffic generated, number of employees. You know, we would be in a mode of helping the DRB, the Development Review Board, work through a proposal like that. And that's the kind of analysis we would help them do is this a change to the nature or extent of the use? Because if the use is not conforming, the nature and extent cannot change. And so also, having one kind of industrial use is not a foot in the door to having all kinds of industrial use.
Yeah.
Having a transportation and warehousing use at the fidelity that the use table there describes it means you could have, instead of Joe's transportation and warehousing, you could have Bob's transportation and warehousing. And instead of shipping sneakers, you could ship lobsters or something, but you couldn't become a tannery. Right, because you're not zoned industrial, you're non-conforming.
So that was my other question was like, based on some of the questions that you folks were asking, about kind of the. Like what comes next, what are the possibilities of what will come next? And my understanding from the site visit was that that company has been there a long time, is that correct?
The which one?
The trucking company, is that?
Yeah, and earlier I pulled up that 1962 image. It's been there, I think, a very long time, certainly predating this current version of zoning. And like Matt said, probably even some level of industrial use extending back before the creation of zoning. It's challenging too, because it doesn't have like a vested site plan of any kind. It's just sort of a gravel parking area. That's sort of in flux. A lot of this conversation, I think, dovetails with the conversation we had a couple of years ago when we were working on the village zoning district. And use is so squishy when the neighborhood impacts are how it operates. So a cute bakery that you walk down to and get a croissant and a cup of coffee is a lot different than a 50,000 square foot industrial facility that's manufacturing to distribute nationally. And at the end of the day, both of those are an NEICS code for bakery, but their scale and intensity is so different, and that can iterate to manufacturing, wood shops, breweries. It's all about traffic, square footage, you know, the types of mechanical that a building requires. Is it just a typical HVAC system, or does it need more specialized air filtering systems? If you're, you know, in the parking lot at Maple Tree Place, you can smell the steaks at the restaurants. That's a scale of intensity and odor that you probably wouldn't want in the residential, going into residential zoned areas. So with the village district, there isn't a list of allowed uses. There's a very short list of prohibited uses and a set of very strict development standards for how much outdoor space, how much outdoor storage there can be to try to attract that small scale, the little village scale bakery type development.
And sorry, I have one more question about that parcel, the trucking company. based on your comment before, am I understanding that there is no residential home on this property now?
That's where the record gets a little bit interesting, so it's one parcel. There's two ownerships in the grand list, and there's an unlanded mobile home that the playground equipment business owns. I'm not quite sure all the details of the relationship, but I think the records do indicate that that mobile home could be occupied residentially. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, sounds like it. Okay. Thank you for that. I just wanted to clarify exactly what was happening in that space.
And the residential comment, also something we're considering is how much over the past couple of years zoning has changed to simplify and encourage residential development. So the most recent changes are an existing lot can have a building with 1 to 4 units in it administratively. So not having to go through that full development review board, public hearing process, a much quicker permitting process. That opens up development potential for those smaller lots that wasn't there before. The growth management system has also been simplified significantly. And then the density in the residential zoning district has increased and incentivized affordable housing, so that larger parcel has better redevelopment potential for residential than it did before. And those were some of the survey comments we heard as well about keeping the area residential. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Vicky Crocker and my father is Mark Farrell and he owns where that garage was and he lives on that property. So it's, you know, I grew up in this area and it's been, it kind of seems like there's two different pieces, right? So it's North Burnell Road, there's a lot of residential, and then there's the corner where my dad is and a roadside marine is, which seems very industrial to me. You know, he lives there now because everything got built around him for all these years. He's grandfathered in from years and years ago. So I did speak to him and my brother and I also, and you know, we really think that where he lives at this point, that industrial seems appropriate for that. It's a really busy section. It just seems like that every across the street, there's a shop across the street, there is Avenue A, B, C, and D on the other side. So that feels, at this point, feels like it's industrial. It doesn't feel like a neighborhood.
Can you point to which one that is on the map?
Yeah, and I can,
That one, that. So it has a little bit of frontage on industrial.
There's a lot of McKinnon. Going in the back of the lot.
yeah, so when we popped out at the site visit on the sidewalk on North Brownell, we could see the White House and that garage and, you know, even before the site visit, the vehicles were queuing like all the way to the house next to it. So it does feel like that house is a part of that industrial ave intersection, whereas that one lot down does feel like it's part of that more residential tree lined North Brownell Street.
It doesn't have sidewalks too, so that makes it a lot less inviting for any foot traffic at all, so.
One more comment.
I need to run, so. When this concludes, we're gonna go back and talk more about chimney supply. I saw some folks for that come in, so I won't be here. Emily knows what's up. Folks have the memo and there's extra prints of the memo here, so, if I don't get back, carry on. I'll catch up tomorrow. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
So if these properties, any or all of them do get rezoned, will there be any conditions put in that to accommodate or buffer for the residential areas?
Great question. So hypothetical scenario, let's say they were all zoned industrial and a development was proposed. It would be subject to chapter 23, the landscape chapter. And the landscape chapter does landscape buffers of varying widths depending on what the proposed use is and what the adjoining use is. So industrial to industrial, tiny buffer. Industrial to residential, bigger buffer, and then the DRB can require a berm or a fence. And most applicants typically do that fence. Then there's the lighting chapter where all lighting needs to be fully shielded downward facing. There's lighting standards to prevent light trespass directly going on the abutting property. But the lighting standards aren't perfect. If there's a parking lot across from your property, you will see the lights, you will experience the lights, though they won't shine directly on your property, they'll be there. And then chapter 18 is our nuisance chapter where the DRB can look at things like restricting hours of operation, restricting delivery times, noise, odor, vibration. So if it were gonna be a big, heavy industrial use that was gonna have a lot of equipment, the DRB might be asking for, provide a sound study, provide a noise study that shows what is gonna happen on this site. The Development Review Board, the precedent has really been the noise generated with intense industrial activity. So think about the ST Ireland cement plant. Things like vehicles idling and backing up make a lot of noise, but they're not typically something that triggers that more intense level of review. Though could chapter 18 be looked at in more detail as part of a corner commercial standard and enhance those standards? Certainly. So in general, the standards reduce impact, but they don't fully eliminate it. And especially in terms of lighting and landscaping, it helps soften it, but it's not like a total dense hedge or blank wall where you're not seeing any lights.
And it's also subjective to the zoning committee at the time, correct? And what motivations there are and what they might allow and not allow. Politics, I mean, there's so many variables that might allow, you know, a different level of allowable issues that, you know, if you just don't change the zoning, it won't, you can't, it won't happen. You won't open up that door.
And that's where the Development Review Board is very prescriptive with the bylaw and likes to follow the bylaw to the T. But if the bylaw standard is not quantifiable or something that's hard to quantify like odor, it can be really challenging. So if the bylaw says your setback is 25 feet, the DRB is gonna hold it to 25 feet. And the bylaw gives the board very little modes of discretion, but there are some places in the bylaw where it can be a bit more subjective. And things like odor, noise can be so subjective, so site specific. We have had cases where the lighting plan is perfect on the plan, and then a property a quarter mile away can see the lights. And they're very dim, but it impacts their sensitivities because they just have different preferences.
I'm sorry, just want
Yeah.
to just comment quickly. I think the adjacent property owners are the ones really concerned about this, but this is a whole neighborhood next to this property that could be impacted. It's not just adjacent. You're not, okay, so thank you for saying that. Just, you know, it's right behind my house, so obviously it's a big deal to me, but even if your house is down across the street, all these things could still be a factor in the neighborhood. So there's a lot of people, a lot of families that this could affect.
I was just gonna summarize a couple of things that I've heard and thought or were reinforced, not decisions, but thoughts. The trucking company property, just on the map, looked like it was not good to have industrial that close to residential on the whole. And the back end of it is already mostly in the wetland buffer now for the brook, now that we have expanded those buffers to 150 feet over the last decade. Which means not much could happen there, but it also looks like it should be residential, if anything. The motorsports at the north end and the one that we were just talking about that's on the corner looked like they're more part of Industrial Avenue, and the very name of Industrial Avenue says it's industrial. But there are residential properties across the brook and further up industrial, it turns to residential at the brook. So the fact that the motorsports would be severely restricted from redevelopment by the buffer for the wetland, for the brook, means that I'm not sure that it's a huge, here from that one right here. Yeah, I'm not sure what it means. So that was a big question mark to me. it's interesting to know that the owner of that next one thinks it's commercial or industrial, excuse me. Because that's a parcel I wouldn't wanna get in the way of what the current owner who's treating it as residential is.
Well, it wasn't residential, it used to be a
Right.
mechanics garage. for
I've been
years.
there for the garage, I'm
Yeah.
old enough.
Yeah, so,
So I knew it was that, but I know that currently it's residential. But the kind of thing that occurs to me is if we say that can be industrial, but the trailer, the trucking company is a residential, retains residential zoning. And somebody then builds a fourplex on that trucking company site. It's across from the park and it's compatible with residential. But then somebody on the corner goes industrial in a way that makes a lot of noise and things. And there's that residential property, that's tiny residential property in between. So what's the impact on those of where we do the boundary? And to me, this is it's like a Tetris or a puzzle that has many factors, the wetland buffer, the impact of each one. And to me, boundaries between different zones are always problematic, and chimney NEC would confirm that. So to me, I still haven't seen how all of those things come together, but I certainly see that what's currently the trucking company makes most sense to be residential, to remain residential. I just haven't seen it, what happens beyond that makes sense. And again, this is looking for the long range, not looking for, and it's hard because people, just changing the wetland buffer affects property owners. But there's people still upset with the interstate going through their property. When the interstate went in and, things happen that affect people, and our job is to look, oh, what's the best for everybody in the long term? And that's what we're trying to look at. And I don't know if that helps to hear those thoughts articulated. Or if it prompts additional comment that would help us sort it out.
Well, those lots are smaller though, so I assume the total amount of noise and extra traffic that it would actually generate.
Yes.
Is a lot lower. Than, like like a cement factory, or even like the trucking lot is a lot larger too, so like. It could abut, but like the impact most likely would be less, so that sounds like a problem that might not even occur. In the future, it's like good to think about, but I don't know. And it's like, it's their properties too, so like, there's no. I'm not generally not for not allowing what people want, so.
I'm not sure if, obviously, we requested the review to look at making, roadside industrial. Did the other properties also ask, or was it my understanding that they were just, it was the time to include them at the time, so. I'm not hearing any representative from the trucking outfit. Are they okay staying, residential, or are they also, all four properties are definitely interested in becoming industrial? And as a side note, just to address one of the things you said, if you did isolate, say, the three properties versus the trucking company, and then that property was abandoned or left for 12 months and then became residential, and now it's budding an industrial, at least that's a residence that's coming knowing that those properties are industrial.
Yes.
And just as more than likely, I mean, roadside's been there for decades, all of the residential that came behind it, roadside was there before that, and they knew at that time, which should make it less impactful, now.
Reading all the comments says that your neighbors are pretty happy with what roadside is doing now. The fear is if it were changed to industrial,
Sure.
and what would come. And what looks like to me is what would come couldn't do a lot other than use the existing
Right.
building for the existing use.
because of the offset in the river and so on and so forth, but it may loosen up some offsets or something like that, but, I lost my train of thought there on that, but, at least, all of those. That property, all of the residential came afterwards, and therefore shouldn't be as big a deal, you know what I mean? Even if it was another industrial use of some sort, it does, like I said, I'm assuming it has to be a permitted use. And those considerations would be taken at that time, but at least it wouldn't be something that was grandfathered in that had to go back to residential.
What does the commercial, changing it to commercial allow them to do?
Industry.
Industrial.
It would allow them to be any of the uses in the industrial zoning district table, which varies.
Victoria Avenue, A, B, or C. Then you vote, similar business to that, that's just a good example.
Yeah, yeah, avenue, everything off Industrial Avenue, so a little bit of Williston Road, and then like Shunpike, Krupp Drive. These lots are a little different in that they're much smaller, even the long parcel, it's large. But it's not usually that big rectangle that some of those commercial sites or industrial sites are looking for. To put like a pre-made warehouse type building on. But it varies, so construction, manufacturing uses, transportation and warehousing. Some more officey uses, professional, scientific, technical services. Childcare is also allowed. Entertainment, recreation, so fitness, recreational centers, gyms, that kind of thing.
But it's also that property, the roadside parcel is pretty constrained by the stream buffer. And so I assume that if there was a proposal to change the use significantly, it would basically have to occupy that kind of southwestern corner of the lot.
Good question. So in the nonconformity chapter, there's three main kinds of nonconformity: lot, structure, and use. Lot's easy. This is a conforming lot. It meets the frontage requirement, minimum lot size, etc. Use is the non-conforming use, and then there's structure, and structure applies to both building and things like parking and outdoor storage. So the use is non-conforming because it's in the residential district. Even if it was turned industrial, the structure would still be non-conforming because the building and the parking and outdoor storage. So you could maintain what's shown on the vested site plan, and I think there's one from the 1990s, I believe, for the site. You can maintain what's shown on that site plan, but building an addition, expanding outdoor storage areas, that would not be permitted. Even something like, well, I'm just building an addition over existing paved area, it's still impervious, that would still be expanding the nonconformity. So anytime a site is redeveloped or partially redeveloped, the development review board is always weighing the change being requested and the amount of nonconformity. So if you're just putting in a ADA ramp, we're not gonna make you take out all your outdoor storage, but you're trying to double your building square footage, then some of those nonconformity thresholds might come into play. And that's a lot of what the DRB spends time on, particularly in commercial industrial buildings, is what's the request being made and is it proportional to correcting the nonconformity?
So one of the things that we're worried about just on the other side of the roadside is you guys are saying, well, the wetlands creates a buffer, it doesn't buffer noise. So what if doggy daycare? And then I got dogs barking, in the future, or something like that, then you have, the wetland buffer means nothing if noise can travel, right? Maybe have.
Especially in the winter.
Yeah.
There's no leaves on the trees.
Yeah, or you have a machine shop that comes in and you have high pitched noise that travels into our residents. Right, so those are the concerns really. As it is now, we've been neighbors with roadside for 30 years, we've been there, we have no issues at all, right? It's just that unknown if it was to sell under different zoning, what could happen regardless of the buffer of the Allen Brook, right? It's more like what kind of noise could be an issue, like, for example, this is very minor, but occasionally a tractor trailer truck will back in there and spend the night running their generator, and you can feel it. You can hear it humming all night, right? Just, that's minor, but when you're sleeping there, it makes a difference. So those are kind of things that we're just concerned about is, again, future changes that could be conforming in the zoning, but you can't tell dogs not to bark overnight or machine shops to create high-pitched noises even during the day. So those are kind of the things that we're just trying to figure out how to be good neighbors and keep our existing.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I pulled up the chapter 18, the nuisance chapter, the noise thresholds, and the standards are the sound level at the property line, and where it's the receiving property is the residential district, would be 60 decibels daytime and 50 decibels at nighttime. So that's like a conversation taking place at your property line all night. So it's not a sound level that's, gonna blow out your eardrums like the F-35s, but it is like humming, like a noise that could happen, and impact quality of life in a different way.
So there would be a provision under industrial that would say barking dogs would not be tolerated, would not be an allowable use.
That would be a fun one if that came into the development review board. So let's take that case study. Say it was zoned industrial and it was gonna be, roadside was gonna be converted to a doggy facility. The DRB would be looking for a noise study, and that noise study would need to show that the decibel level at the property line doesn't exceed the daytime and nighttime maximums. But it's still a decibel level that neighbors, not only you guys, but probably several homes down, would be able to hear. So it's a faint sound, but it's still a sound that's in the back of your mind. And that I think
require a tall fence or sound barrier.
Yeah, and that might be one of the things that gets required. So can the DRB require mitigating measures? The DRB may require the construction or installation of noise mitigation, such as berms, walls, soundproofing, etc. And that's such interesting that this is the same night as NCS, because the New England Chimney Specific Plan spent a lot of time, and in a sound study was conducted, and the fence that was designed for that was like a double walled sound attenuating fence, so the sound doesn't transmit the same through as like a single pane fence. It's like a specific design, and it showed that the noise would reduce over existing conditions. But that would be something that the applicant would need to present that information, the DRB would need to be satisfied. And at the end of the day, is that sound attenuating wall or fence gonna resolve 100% of the sound? Probably not. There is the town noise ordinance, which is enforced by the police department, but again, that's, on a complaint basis and on their enforcement timeline.
Right, think all small now, don't need to make any decision today. We need to make any decision. I think this has been fantastic, like I've gotten so much out of your comments, I feel like it's really helpful. I think the site visit was also super helpful. Just, walking that area, seeing it in person is just such a different experience, of course, than just looking at the map, so. So I think this has all been super helpful for us. I don't know if, like, what would be helpful at this point, Emily? Should we kind of like share some thoughts from us or continued questions? Like, what do you think is the best way to sort of?
Yeah, I think thoughts from you guys on, do you wanna see like some map boundary options laid out? Some like rough sketch language for corner commercial.
Yeah.
That might take into a stricter consideration on, noisy
Yeah.
uses, that kind of thing.
I mean, I guess I'll just give my sense of where the feedback has gone is, that it might make sense. And this would be consistent with some other zoning, practices that we've put into play. Where if there was frontage on industrial Ave, it could be potentially zoned industrial. And that would basically include roadside and the next property, your father's property. And then, I mean, and I would love to see some sketches and proposals and some descriptions. But I'm just trying to reflect back what I've heard, in terms of like a map. And then leaving both the small house and the trucking facility area residential. With the idea that that is kind of remaining the ultimate, as Matt was saying, is kind of the ultimate default, right? That it would at some point revert back to, and partly because it's fronting on North Brownell Road. We did some things along those lines in the village with frontage on Williston Road. Certain things were allowed that were not residential in the same way. And I just wanted to get kind of like a little temperature check. Like, does that sound like an accurate summary of where the conversation is going from our public members?
I would agree with that. I mean, just one thing I was concerned about.
The noise.
Right, and I hope that was somewhat helpful, what Emily just shared about noise mitigation and those kinds of things, so that, and then obviously, like, one thing to keep in mind too is that any process where a new use was coming in, is going to go through development review. And those are public hearings, they're required to be noticed in the paper, those kinds of things. So there is a chance for you to give feedback on specific proposals. We, the planning commission, we just make the rules, we don't actually enforce them, which is the great position to be in my mind. The DRB is the one that really, it's like, okay, this is what it has to look like, and this is what you have to do. Use. And so hopefully that kind of assuaged some of those concerns.
And I'd like to add personally, thank you, and I really mean this to all of you. We don't get as much feedback as we'd like from the public. I mean, we just don't. And so when people care enough, and I realize you have vested interest, I get that. But the fact that you care enough to come to this meeting and spend all this time and sit here and really give us your feedback in person as well as via the survey results, it's enormously helpful and we really appreciate it. You also get a sense, I hope, of the messy nature of this process and the fact that there's a triumvirate that runs the town, right? The planning commission worries about long-term stuff, the DRB enforces the code, and the ultimate decision, of course, is the select board, and we all try to work together to make that happen. But I just want to say thank you. It's enormously helpful to have you.
Super.
Yeah, I think it worked the way that we wanted. Because when we are thinking about this, we wanted to make sure that we want all the affected residents and the owner of the so-called property to have some say in it without us making the decision without your inputs, right? So this helps us a lot more better understand different side of the so-called conversation. And we will try to make a right decision and then go from there. But bear in mind, anything or any changes that happen is not blank check, right? There's so many rules and regulations and, safeguard are in place to make sure that thing doesn't go out of hand. Right, so that's for sure. But we will do the right thing and then we go from there. Right?
So
Thank you for coming. This is really one of the so-called most interactive thing that we have for the commissions.
can we ask the planning staff to produce some options and more specificity and that kind of thing?
I think so, yeah, and I appreciate the public comment too, because being able to have these new questions and play case studies out and look at our bylaw standard, not with a development proposal on the table that has to be decided on, but being able to case study it is really, really helpful. And I think there can be a pretty good middle ground here of, probably changing the zoning district boundary, enhancing some of what chapter 18 says, maybe even doing corner commercial at the same time to balance the commercial and industrial interests of being able to maintain a certain type of use, and then the concerns. And I don't want to speak for Matt, but I could see Matt wanting to say no dog businesses anywhere near residential ever again. You all know how that one played out. That was tough, so. And that's a lot of what we're hearing. All of this reiterates what the process that we did with the village zoning district, and we haven't had too many development proposals to really have good case study examples, but I think we can take a look at some of that language that we used in the village and adapt it and workshop it here.
Thank you all.
So
Thank
discuss, what are the next steps, the process, and when will we know where you're leaning? Is it, decisions made and too late, see you later?
Great question. So next steps are, Matt and I and other staff will work on drafting up some language proposals. Ultimately, the planning commission needs to decide that they're ready to warn a public hearing. And it's probably gonna be in a package with other bylaw amendments, so timeline is TBD. This could take a little bit of time. It might not be till the fall that the hearing is ready to be warned. You guys got letters in the mail as a courtesy, so we did that as part of this enhanced community process. The statutory requirement for public notice is it goes on the town website, it goes in the Observer. We try to do extra publishings on like Front Porch Forum. We have a Planners Quarters newsletter. I will do my best to try to remember as well to everybody that filled out their email on the sign-in sheet, or the survey, give them the notification. But ultimately, the statutory requirement would be, check the Observer, check our website, give us a call or email to see where we're at on things. That is very different from the Development Review Board process. So if the Development Review Board is gonna have a hearing item, you will get an abutter notification in the mail of a proposed development. So that's one key difference between a bylaw amendment process where abutters don't get notified and a development review process where they do.
Would this ultimately have to go to DRB for final approval?
So the process will be the planning commission will have their public hearings on bylaw amendments. Then they would go to the select board for another set of bylaw hearings. Those would also be noticed in the Observer and town website. Once the bylaw amendment is approved, then applicants and property owners could apply for a development proposal, and that would go to the Development Review Board on their own time frame. So the public hearing process we're talking about right now is planning commission to select board over several months. Probably concluding sometime over the winter, if not the early spring, just depending on how fast we can get on the select board's busy schedule.
So the select board makes the final call
Mhm.
on this discussion we're having.
And they also have at least two public hearings, right? Or is it that we have two and then the one?
I think that's with town plan.
Oh, plan, okay.
Yeah, I think with
Right.
bylaw amendments, it's just one public hearing.
So we will have a public hearing if we make a change,
Mhm.
and the select board will have a public hearing, so there are additional. But it's good that you're here now, because you're influencing what we maybe propose for a public hearing, and I would be very surprised if we propose any change to properties that front on Brownell Road. And I think we're gonna consider what to do with properties that front on Industrial Avenue. It's reading the
That's a total of
where we're in that ballpark.
But what we would approve in the bylaw amendment, and then the select board would approve, that's just like. Okay, now this parcel is. Industrial, it doesn't mean a specific
Right, I get it. But it's-
user is coming in with a
but once you
proposal.
cross that line, that's where. the
Yeah,
biggest
where you
consideration
bring it
is,
to.
yeah.
At that point, it shifts over to the DRB process.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all coming. We're gonna continue our NECS conversation, but if you're only here for the, the
Brownell Road.
community meeting, you are welcome to depart.
It's been a long day.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Very much.
Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you all in person.
It's a lot.
Yeah, sure, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks, guys.
This is like given the camp program or the camp.
I said I'm there. Office makes it.
You guys have to wait for a long time.
But there's actually so much overlap.
It's so similar.
You see so many complicated,
It's
like,
amazing.
it's the same, kind of like residential, industrial.
It's exactly the same, it's
Friction.
a different location.
Yep.
So
It's not very far away either from.
Yeah.
At almost town, it's just.
So I sat on the DRB for about 6 years, like that, when I lived in, so. First of all, before we even get into this, thank you for doing what you guys do, because there's a lot of. Thank you, a lot of work that you guys do. The guy, they fought around. Government doesn't work.
Great.
Yeah, and we do have Pierre Samard from New England Chimney Supply attending on Zoom. Pierre, if you want to be able to speak, I'm gonna promote you to panelist. And then I'm sharing screen of the letter that he provided. I think Matt provided copies of those as well.
And I remember Pierre, and could you introduce yourselves and?
So I'm sorry, I'm not Pierre.
No.
Pierre is online.
Yeah.
Pierre was not gonna be able to make it tonight. He asked me to sit in as a surrogate. I knew about it.
Were you part of the earlier process?
As a kind of bystander, yeah, I'm very familiar with it. I've been with Pierre at this company now for just over 16 years, so.
And then you're done, what?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're gonna hear some statement or
And we should say I'm Chapin,
And Megan.
Nikki.
And Steve.
4 of the 7 or 6, 6 at this
For
point.
the 6 at this
At,
point.
planning commission.
We have Wilmer, Shayla and.
Oh, yeah, 7.
Yeah, there's 7 total, yeah.
4 of the
and
7.
3 are missing tonight.
So is Pierre online?
Yes, Pierre is on, like, he's on the attendee side of thing. If he wants to be able to speak, he would need to accept the panelist promotion, but he is online, listening.
Okay. All right, so we heard Matt's summary of both what had transpired in 2021. Although it was much longer, I believe it began well before that. I was on the planning commission at that time, and I recall that meeting because it was online still. Um, and, and so I guess we could open up to additional conversation and
Any
thoughts,
statements?
questions. I guess I have a question right off the bat, which is, in our previous process, we heard a lot from local residents who were, abutting landowners and, were concerned about noise. You mentioned the attenuated fence before, Emily, and then I also recall, there were concerns about, you know, kind of the reverse beeping of trucks and the lighting and the hours of operation. And I also recall that NECS was very responsive to a lot of those concerns. And you know, and even though the specific plan didn't ultimately go through for other reasons, I remember at the time that I did appreciate NECS's effort to kind of make it work and, you know, be good neighbors, stay in the location, but also adjust it for future needs, present and future needs. So I guess, you know, obviously, we're gonna be talking with, we're hearing from local residents again, depending on what the nature of.
Yeah, and I guess that's a question for you guys. Do you wanna replicate what we just did for North Brownell and do a mailing? I could literally hit copy paste on the survey.
We're
that we just
not, yeah, because we're not talking about a specific plan now, we're talking about changing the zoning boundary.
Right, or zoning standards.
Yeah.
Well, I think a combination of all three for both.
It's our understanding that this area is gonna be taking a peek at right, in the near future, right? And our argument
Yes.
is that if you're gonna be taking a peek at it, we'd like a really good, honest look at that section again. Because, you know, in our opinion, it really warrants a good look. And that's all, that's really what we're asking.
Yeah, you look even like to the west, like you got that little trailer park, but everything, you know, you go way back into Williston, it's all commercial. And then you got that little residential area on the on the west side.
Yeah.
And there's even an abandoned house and
Yeah.
it doesn't look, you know, it doesn't look like a residential area or that people would wanna live there. And then you get over to, you know, on the other side of South Brown Hill Road, then it's all commercial right down through. So to me, I think it would, you know, personally, it would make more sense to make that continuously across there. And we did put that, you know, in 2016, we built that, we're doing the chimney as why is now. And I think it's a nice looking building and I think that would be an upgrade to what the houses look like on that corridor right there. And then they're in a situation where they, you know, they're still growing and they got, well, and they sell all over the United States, so they're in other states, and actually they expanded, when we got turned down here, they expanded in Virginia. And we, you know, they need to expand again, and we're pushing to have it here in Vermont, you know, the right here, because that's where, you know, Kira's a Vermonter and I'm a Vermonter and we would like to, you know, stay right here and keep the jobs right here in our neighborhood
And just to throw some numbers on what Don's saying, he's absolutely right. We are still growing, and we've had to ship for our numbers that we looked at last week, we shipped about 40 jobs in Virginia. Because we are literally bursting at the seams the same way we were 5 years ago when we attempted. And because of that, we have a smaller facility in Virginia that we have had to expand down there because we can't expand here. We much rather prefer to do it here because we're all local.
Also there to appreciate the background. I mean, the 5 or so lot on the left hand side is where the residential plots are impacted, everything else is no, right? Currently border wise. The one on the left is where it is, or one of those?
Yeah, they own that first one.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the second,
It's a residence.
It's half and half.
Yeah, or
So it,
30, 2/3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's in both,
no, what I meant is outside of this yellow.
Oh, like this area?
Yeah, yes, all the adjacent units.
Yeah, so that's Kirby Lane, that's all single family homes, I wanna say
Okay.
about 15-ish.
Yeah, I'm seeing like 5 or 6 single family home to the left of the yellow proposed area, correct?
Yeah, so within the Gateway zoning district on that southeast corner. There is a single family home that's falling into disrepair. That's on a pretty decently sized lot.
Mm,
And then next to it, yeah, 3/4 of an acre. This lot is also split. This has another single family home falling into disrepair. About 50-50, front half in Gateway, back half in residential. Then there's this little parcel, it's a flag lot where the driveway is in Gateway. The house itself is back in residential.
And that homeowner, I know he was for us to expand.
I remember that.
Yeah, I remember that too. And
So-
then these are the two lots that.
To me, the idea of Gateway was that it was gonna be a transition where it still felt more or less residential, because that's what you're coming into, but it was commercial possible, interspersed. And it really seems though the residential part is falling into disrepair. On the other side of the road, there's a good stockade fence and there are roads that go back in further so that many of the houses on the other side, almost all the houses on the other side are further back from the road. And so that is the way that it sort of worked as a gateway there. So I do feel as though it wants to be connected to what's happening to the west on Route 2. U-Haul has taken over a couple lots, and then there's the lot that's on the corner of Brownell. That I'm assuming will be somewhat commercial at some point. Is that right?
Possibly, that's probably another conversation for the planning commission. I think someone was looking at doing. Higher density residential.
Yeah. Your
Yeah,
battery's running.
the current conversation though is only for this 2 plot, right, that you guys are only to change the zoning or change the usage.
Yeah, that
So
is
there-
correct, but you know, again, I mean, it's our understanding that this area is gonna be looked at anyway, so we just wanted to put our 2 cents in that. You know, if you could take a peek at these 2 lots, just as so gracious.
So are you saying though? The conversion of 2 lot that you're only. May not be enough for future if you guys want to expand further, is that a conversation?
Let me repeat what I think I just heard you ask. Are you asking if we had permission to build on these 2 lots, that would be enough?
Mhm,
There's no way to know for us to answer that question.
for
because-
now,
Yeah, I mean, for now, in 2010, doors open for wheelchair supply down the street at 280 Colors. We started with the company now pushes 140. 16 years later, which is pretty phenomenal growth. Now, if this company were to continue that, you know, there's really no way to know without projecting 10, 15, 20 years in the future, whether we need more. No, I would
well,
probably,
no immediate needs.
no, after
Okay,
this,
that's
we thought we had our forever home with 34 Carver Street.
But it didn't take a long.
It didn't take us long. So.
And from my perspective, our town plan, our comprehensive plan direction is to look at this whole area.
Yes,
And so I wanna look at it as a whole area. And I'm feeling like the south side of Route 2 should be changed. The north side, I'm not sure. And I don't see a driver that says it should be other than what's there. Unless, I'll be interested, I guess, Emily, if staff.
Well, it's already gateway.
It's already gateway.
It's all gateway.
Yeah, which is much more flexible,
Yeah.
but nothing has actually happened in the
No,
time
And even
since
that,
we designate it as
Yeah.
gateway.
and even that building that's on the corner of, on the northeast corner of Brownell and the Route 2. That looks like it was at one time an inn or is that a business at this point?
I don't know.
I drove by it today and I think it's still mostly residential. There was some little indication of some maybe home business kind of thing for a while, but.
Yeah, that's the driveway that goes through from Brownell to.
Yeah.
To, that to me looks like one that could be commercial.
Yeah.
Whereas the rest of what's happening behind the stockade fence is looking like it's gonna remain residential. At least for now. So I wanted to, from my perspective, I thought it was worth focusing, yeah, there's that.
The E911 shows it as residential multi, so I assume it's residential.
Apartments.
Yeah. I think that was the original intent of the Gateway District was to allow those properties that abut Williston Road some flexibility so that they could and this was 2015, I was also on the planning commission then. And that was the sense because a lot of the, the residential uses that are still happening, the homes that are still in there, some of them already have home businesses. There's like a doggy daycare or something in there somewhere and,
Yeah, I think there's like a phone repair.
yeah, there's various things already going on, and that was well before the Robert property converted over to all the storage and all those kinds of things, and all that redevelopment hadn't even happened yet. So I guess my thought is, like, we've already given quite a lot of flexibility to the Gateway West district. For which, if I'm remembering correctly, is mixed use. There's both commercial and more intense residential possibilities, like people could, you could build significantly more intense residences. None of that has really happened. So I'm very interested to see what your thoughts are.
The crux of it for us is that right next to us is split. Right, in an area that we can
I see.
do positive things on is just not big enough. But the second, third, 2/3 of that lot is a different zone,
Okay,
which prevents us from using the entire lot.
got it.
And you're industrial,
We're-
yes. And does Gateway allow industrial?
No,
No,
Oh, I did,
and that was the whole crux of the specific plan was that. And then the pre-application that came in a couple years ago is industrial is not allowed in Gateway. And this is probably the shortest table in the bylaw for allowed uses.
Can you expand it?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
very,
so-
very limited. So residential, you can have under finance and insurance, you could have investment advisors, the insurance agencies and brokerages. Real estate, rental and leasing services, but not including outdoor sales and storage. Which is tough if you're like a rental management company, you might have trucks and equipment. Professional and technical services, so think of engineers. That kind of thing, vets, admin and support services, healthcare and social assistance. Death care, pet care. Civil and professional organizations. So retail isn't allowed, and that's like some of the questions that we get is, I wanna do a retail or a business where I have customer traffic. that's a little bit different than what's here. So this is a very narrow list of allowed uses. Compared to other zoning districts where it's much broader, especially in customer oriented things like food service. Like there's no food service allowed here. That's tough too.
So is the island ice cream, it's allowed there?
Because it's accessory to
To
manufacturing, so they occupy that building and I think a couple others, so they're tied to the manufacturing use.
They make their ice cream.
But that's not Gateway still.
That's industrial west, so in industrial
Okay.
zoning district, you can have on-site dining if it's
Yeah.
accessory to that manufacturer, so breweries. Pizza, there's a pizza wholesaler that has a pizza slice shop in
Okay.
industrial. Island Ice Cream is
So-
probably the best example right now.
Already retail is okay in the Gateway district.
No, in the
No.
industrial.
Industrial.
Oh,
So Island Ice Cream would not be able to go in the industrial district, or in the gateway district, because it's an industrial use.
right,
Um,
but commercial is
only in gateway, only what's on this table.
all in that list, okay.
Right.
So we need to change that. But the question to me is, we go as far as industrial, because I'm not sure, because if we could do the whole area, which is what I think we should do, I'm not, because there's residential right behind it. I'm not sure about the industrial manufacturing.
One of the things that we had done the first time around. And Tom, you can correct me if this is not entirely accurate, but we did do some studies with the wall.
Yeah,
And all the lighting and all that stuff comes into play, which are already rules that are already engaged.
I think you did a great job with that,
So
sir.
that cooperation
Yes,
is not gonna go away.
yeah,
You know, we're still.
yeah,
gonna
we
do all of that.
fell down on the rec path signaling the intersection, walking across the intersection of Brownell and stuff, not on your adaptations.
Okay, so, it's after 9. And do we have a sense that we can, ask the planning staff to sketch up some possibilities?
Yes, are you thinking move IZ? Expand gateway? Do you wanna do a neighborhood survey? Site visit?
Or just go and
We're just going
give us
ahead and.
something, I don't know.
Are we required to do a survey?
No.
No.
No, that's good. Whatever that we did it in, for the previous one, is more like we are overextending our outreach. Right, if this is already an existing thing and it's already impact is there, I don't think we need to do all of the things. We are still going to do public hearing and all those things anyway, right? Correct?
I think given how vocal some of the Kirby Lane residents were. I think in the interest of transparency, I think it would be to benefit overall to demonstrate the buffering and all those things that we had discussed before. And so I personally would actually disagree with my esteemed colleague. And say, I think there should be some kind of survey, especially if you've got one kind of queued up. And then I would love to see, like, what would it take for, for this expansion, like, what scenario would it, would allow them to expand? What would be involved? Moving the zoning boundary. Got to deal with that split lot. Kind of refresh all the buffering and walls and all that kind of stuff. I remember there was something last time also about trying to make it so that truck traffic could kind of come in and swoop through rather than having to back up and those kinds of things.
It actually is basically way it is now, but it'd be just shoved to the west a little more and still
Right,
come in one and come out. And
Yeah.
to show you this is what. This is the drawing that we had, and right now the road comes in right here.
yeah.
And they got the loading dock, so if we could get this addition, we just move the road over here, and then we still come out this way.
Got it.
And I had the feeling before, and I still have it, says Jared Enterprises, but, that's affectionately cats or.
Yes,
Yeah, that is an appropriate use for me on Route 2. And I was
That's your.
I was hoping that they could be moved over here and then you could get all this for the.
That worked out.
Because then we keep the industrial on Commerce Street. Basically, we say it's the frontage of Commerce. And
I'd be willing to do that,
Yeah.
and swap.
because that one thing I didn't like about this plan before, and I don't like here, is having a parking lot being what's on the road, even though there's a good buffer here. Because it feels to me like the road should be accessible, things you would visit if you drive by. You know what I'm saying, that,
What if we had some screening in?
well, that helps, but it feels to me like it's, housing isn't working along the road.
Right,
It feels to me like businesses should be along the road, but not industrial and not parking lot. So it, ideally, parking would be back here and over here. And,
it'd be nice if they would move over there. and
yeah,
swap.
or if this whole thing could move over this way and then have all this be parking here. But,
So we're.
I understand that this is what makes sense for you. And so if there were a way that these could move over here, I would be much more in favor of
But
that.
they're not owned by the same people, so.
No, they'd have to make an arrangement. Well,
Yeah, I think they've tried that
did,
with the affectionately cats.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, we actually, with the owner that had it originally, we were talking with him about
Yeah.
purchasing it, and then after, and he said, I got something else going right now, he said, if not, I'm gonna take you up on your offer if this doesn't go through, and then he ended up selling it back to them, or, they bought it from him, so. We ended up, we lost out, but he never said anything until it was too late, so.
So, the rest of the commission concur with Megan proposal to go ahead and do the so-called solicit neighbor.
Well, I'm not ready for that because I don't know what I would solicit them for.
Okay,
Right,
Because I'm uncertain about putting industrial manufacturing on Route 2. But I'm definitely in favor of relaxing what's required there.
well, it's already there, already on Route 2.
But this is expanding it and putting parking on it.
Can you zoom out just a hair, if you wouldn't mind? So right now where our building is at 34 Commerce Street, just beyond Brown Mill, it turns back into industrial. Right?
Yes,
Right, so, I mean, if there is an honest peek at what the zoning is in the area. And we already understand that the residential look and feel of Williston Road is not working.
yes.
Does it not make sense for the zoning to kind of connect?
To me, bringing industrial in all the way to Blair Park is completely obliterating the transition zone, whereas having commercial there, more flexible commercial is still transition. It's still public friendly. It's not big walls that don't have windows and so forth. So I'm processing. Okay?
Yeah, no, I understand.
This is not a conclusion. And I also like NECS, and I feel like I went through the process with you before, and I felt like you were doing everything you could to be good neighbors with everything. And I would, if we have a specific proposal, I do want to
Yeah,
query all the residents. But I'm not sure what the specific proposal is at this point, because what I'd be interested in is from staff is, what would you recommend? Would you recommend it both sides of the road or just on the south side, all the way from where it's industrial to where it's our, Taft Corners, whatever we call it, our form-based code area? What, as that whole thing, what would be the options?
Right, I don't think we would recommend expanding industrial north of Williston Road in the Gateway West district. I'm not sure about taking industrial all the way to Williston Road. I think where I would land would be expanding industrial for those two lots with enhanced buffer standards, kind of like what we talked about in the North Brumwell area. And then enhancing the list of allowed uses in Gateway West to attract better redevelopment
Yeah.
of those two remaining house lots on the corner. And then some of the other lots on all sides of that, the O'Brien store intersection.
Okay. And I'm for expanding that list for sure.
So let's see that proposal
Yeah.
next meeting.
Yeah.
Right, then.
Or
can-
at some point.
Or
Yes.
option, sorry, next meetings.
Yes, next meetings,
Yeah,
yeah,
on the list.
yeah, we'll add it to the list.
Okay.
But yeah, so probably going in that direction. We are missing a couple planning commissioners, so.
Yeah.
Want to run both of these two proposals, North Brown and this by them.
Mhm.
And then maybe when there's a bit more pointed questions. To query the residents and do the survey at that point before a public hearing is formally
Sounds
done.
good. And to me, even though it's not specific plan, it is in fact adjusting a boundary because of a particular business. Which we're friendly with. But it's the kind of spot zoning that we don't generally want to do. And so I'm having a hard time thinking what the.
Same time, this part of town has been, because of its history and the ways it's
Yes.
got different layers of things happening. Like there's a part in South Brownell, I don't know if it's still there was that machine shop.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think
you know,
that
there's
southern
all
area
kinds
could
of
be
like
revisited.
wackiness going on there, and I feel like it's not really spot zoning if we're trying to grapple with the messiness and expand an existing, you know, categorization or zoning boundary to accommodate, you know, an expansion. When there's so much other crazy stuff going on nearby, it's hard to kind of draw a hard line and say, like, I don't think that's spot zoning, so I'll just leave it there, but.
Yeah, it's like a quilt. This is one piece and we're kind of playing the corners of that one piece with this part of town. The rest of town is so vastly different where boundaries follow the Allen Brook or Interstate 89, where those district boundaries are much more, based in the geography of the area. This part of town, it's a couple of these little parcel areas of the fabric of residential to industrial.
Okay, so can staff make a recommendation of changes to the area, to the Gateway West? Including this one, including uses, commercial uses, and the possible industrial zoning for the two parcels of interest.
Okay, so. Is our next step, we're waiting to see what you guys decide, and then if you do, then we come in and, present the wall, whatever we're gonna do again. Or let's, or what should we be doing?
If the zoning changes, then you will be working with the DRB on the.
Yeah, I don't think you don't have to have any new engineering plans or new wall plans drawn. I think we could probably work off what was submitted as part of the specific plan as a representative example. But it wouldn't be until the bylaw amendments go through both the planning commission and select board that you would work on new development plans for actual construction.
Let's just go down that road for a second. If there is a change that allows us to move forward, and it is a different zone, whatever that zone is, it's up for debate, but let's just pretend to change the zone for now. What other things with the changes of zoning rules and regulations, is there anything that we need to start looking at now? If there's anything different that may pop up? Or layout, building, I mean, of course, industrial is different from gateway, and gateway is different from industrial. If we start playing with the zones, which quite frankly, I hope we can. But what changes from the original proposal that we did 5 years ago may or may not hold water now, I guess is my question.
You don't have to put in a rec path.
Well, you'll still have to construct, either a sidewalk or rec path
Yeah.
along the property frontage.
Currently, but not.
But not going beyond that. Yeah, I can't really think of that offhand. I think that's definitely a question to keep in mind when this comes back around for another, pre-hearing conversation like this one with the planning commission. And, that's after that couple options of language are drafted and we have a community survey. I think another good touch point for that. Yeah, that topic.
So the next point, we gotta wait until you guys decide if you're gonna do it, and then we can go from there. If we have an engineer, we can do it then.
Yeah. And you've made a strong case.
Yeah, but it's a slow process too.
Well, we know, so,
Yeah.
6, 7 years ago.
The word glacier comes to mind.
Right.
I do appreciate you guys listening to us, because I don't think.
Yeah, thank you for coming and for staying so long.
Yes, we apologize for making you wait so long.
I was on a board for 10 years, and it is a thankless job, so.
Oh, we are short a member. You're- Feeling nostalgic or anything. Emily, do we have anything else on our
That's a good
to-do list?
I don't believe so. That was everything. Yep.
Great, okay, motion to adjourn.
Let's go. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, John.